thing as a perfect writer. For me, Grammarly.
Alright, well, that one was aborted. I was going to do a blast from the past. I suppose I still can. It's fucking YouTube ads. Making life so difficult. Uh-oh. It is time to end that, because if I have too many seconds, then YouTube will probably take the video down. YouTube and the legions of algorithmic entities that now rule our destiny. Welcome to another live limitless meet. This one is called News from the Frontline in the End Times, which of course is a blast from the past. And seeing as there's only me here, I probably won't carry on talking. That's definitely an all-time low. Maybe the past is somewhere that I don't want to go. That's possibly it. Hi, Rob. That's strange because it says there's one person here. But that's me. So I'm not quite sure how that works. I guess I'll have to just ignore that little counter at the top of the screen. It is lying, yeah. Okay, now it does say 3. And where 2 or 3 are gathered together, the threshold will appear. So, where was I? Yeah, so I decided to do something different this week for a couple of reasons. One was I felt I was floundering a little bit last week, and that seemed to relate to the format that I'd created, which was to have a subject and a theme and then to do a presentation about it. That put a degree of pressure on me to keep things coherent and so on and so forth. And the other thing was that things have been happening this week. They've actually continued to happen since I decided to make this more about a kind of update, what's going on with me. Potentially that would open it up more for collaboration, discussion, questions, and so on. So yeah, I'll just get right to it then. I will say that I will open. I mean, there's chat here. Obviously, is there for questions at any time. But at a certain point, if things proceed according to plan, then I'll open up the Zoom room, and then people can ask questions if they want, and I'll have you on speaker, so it will show up in the YouTube channel live. I'm going to experiment with that anyway, see if that works. Alright, so the first development I wanted to share was the something that I found out about via Gib Strange, which is a couple of podcasts that talked about me and my thrift store. And the links are in the show notes here at YouTube. I might actually play a little clip. Let's see if I can find it. Should have prepared this ahead of time. Just to give you a taste of what it was like. But this is an incident that occurred back in August. But I didn't know about it. I wasn't there. Just have to take the volume down here a second. And because my wife was working in the thrift store, and these guys came in and they had this strange encounter, which then led them to this much stranger encounter in the bush, local in the forest and the mountains nearby. Anyway, I'm just going to play a clip then here.
There's just, it's nuts.
It's too
nuts.
good to be true, and exactly.
Exactly.
That's what makes me believe it. So,
Okay, well,
So completely
too
furry,
far ahead
sometimes
there.
mangy. Her eyes are as big as eggs, and her disheveled, matted hair always hangs loose like a scarecrow. Her clothes are white, or made of a torn white striped material, or her clothing is, quote, like the bark of pine trees. So, I mean, if you're into Bigfoot at all, there's a lot to unpack there. Ugly and huge, there you go.
So they're talking about the Baba Yaga, the witch, and the similarities to the Bigfoot. It was a subject that Gibb has talked about in Notes of Uncanny Valley, one of the first episodes, which was how Bigfoot hunters end up resembling Big Feet.
Her clothes are white. Tim is actually going to do an entire chapter on the association of ladies in white with Bigfoot, which obviously has a bunch of fairy connotations too. And then finally, one thing I found really interesting too was this idea of the clothing like the bark of a pine tree. Even though it pushes my personal believability index beyond where I think it should be, there are a lot of people who are flesh and blood Bigfooters who claim that Bigfoot have the ability to stand so still that they can appear as a stump or a tree or a log. And that seems like an interesting correlation between that idea of Baba Yaga having, clothing like the bark of a pine tree. So I think there's that's what I first thought of when I heard about them making this Baba Yaga, connection within their story.
Okay. You know what? On that story, and just want to add one last thing before we move on, but what really blew the top of my skull off was when I was listening to kind of the version on Tim's where he was interviewing them, and they just offhandedly mentioned, did any of you catch that the UFO book that they were talking about and the person who worked at the thrift store was Jasun Horsley's wife?
Really? Yeah, that blew my mind.
I was like, okay, that's when I got on board, because I was like, this has gone from a Bigfoot story to being totally full-blown Keelian at this point. Because you've got weird coincidences, like all syncing up that lead up to this dramatic event. And that's where I was like, yes, this is legit now.
I mean, yeah, the idea that Jasun Horsley's wife runs a thrift shop where two guys who have an interest in Sasquatch and go camping and have some really anomalous experiences is just, it's nuts.
It's too nuts. Good to be true. And exactly. That's what makes me believe it.
So, too good to be true, and that's what makes me believe it. So as I tweeted about this, it was a weird experience to find myself part of somebody's high strangeness narrative. Not even me, my wife. It was a weird experience to hear people talking about me as if I were famous. And I'm sure it was a weird experience for Gibb Strange, who just heard this by chance. I mean, he was listening to the podcast as he was falling asleep, and then was jolted awake by this strange, anomalous reference to my wife in the thrift store. So what we're seeing here is what I'm seeing anyway, is a collision of worlds. Maybe more than just two are coming together, as I've been exploring at the blog, or not exploring necessarily, but trying to represent or trying to facilitate even the bringing together the worlds of my research and high strangeness and all the rest of it, and my ordinary mundane life in the thrift store. This also coincides with the podcast of today, the Liminalist, the most forbidden thing there is, which is a conversation with Jenny, his child, about her experiences, childhood experiences, and ongoing into adulthood with Satanists and with ritual abuse. So that's certainly well, that's the first anyway, and not in any way obviously related. So to go back to the Bigfoot experience, wasn't really Bigfoot. You can listen to their full experience at another podcast, not the one I just played a clip from, but they're both linked in the show notes beneath this video, and you can hear about the experience of Alex and his friend as they went into the bush. But in short, what happened was that they came into the thrift store and they encountered my wife, and they saw Prisoner Infinity, and Alex particularly was into UFOs, so he bought the book and he was excited, and they had a conversation about trauma, and then they asked my wife where they could go camping, and she was thinking about it when this strange old lady told them where to go, and it was up Union Bar Road, which is a place that my wife and I walk often, although never as far as these two ended up eventually. Anyway, the lady they encountered was very strange in their description, and they became convinced later on anyway that they'd had an encounter with a witch of some sort because of the nature of their experience in the bush, which you can hear about in the podcast linked. And it is a truly hair-raising encounter. It's quite convincing. I didn't ever feel that I was having my leg pulled or even that there was any exaggerating going on. And it's of a level of, I'd say, Carlos Castaneda high strangeness that they underwent there. So my wife had heard about this, but not what happened. She had heard from the person who bought Prisoner Infinity that something bizarre had happened and that he wanted to talk to us about it. And he had messaged me on Facebook, and I thought I'd messaged him back. This was in December, I believe, and then heard nothing back, and then forgotten all about it until I got an email from Gib about this podcast. So then I went back into my Facebook and I saw that I hadn't messaged him, even though I distinctly remember having done so. And so I messaged him, and then we've been in communication ever since. He's trying to find out who this witch is that he believes was a witch that he encountered in the store, and then later on Vancouver Island. And he realized earlier in an astral projection experience, out-of-body experience, who called herself Baba, as in Baba Yaga. So I guess he tentatively believes, and the evidence tentatively suggests, that he encountered an old lady possessed by the spirit of Baba Yaga in our thrift store, who led him into the bush. Hi, Ross. And led them both into the bush for this very bizarre, hair-raising encounter with the spirits of my local area. That's Hope, BC, for those who don't know. So all of this is quite exciting, and was one of the, it was the thing that inspired me to take a different approach this week. I just thought, well, this really is news from the front line in the end times. It really is getting like that. So why not just share what's going on in my life? So anyway, so I've been in touch with Alex, and we've discussed him coming back here and possibly doing a podcast out there in the bush where he encountered this strange spirit or whatever it was. So I think those are the main points for the first thing. I'm going to move quickly through these because there has been an awful lot that's been happening this week. I suppose the thing I didn't linger on was that experience of listening to these people on the Where Did the Road Go podcast talking about my wife as if that would mean something to people, to listeners, and as if the fact that they'd encountered or that part of the story was about Jasun Horsley's wife somehow gave it credibility and made it Keelian. John Keel being the author of the Mothman Prophecies and other books, who has described his own investigations and how they more and more strange coincidences occur until he realizes that he's part of some strange kind of reality game that he doesn't understand the rules of, that seems to transcend this physical dimension. Anyway, for them that was high strangeness, the fact that my wife and my book was somehow the not the trigger necessarily, but the initial event that then led to this other high strangeness. For me, listening, the high strangeness was that I was part of this story, and that was considered significant. And what's significant to me, and what I want to keep in mind today as I talk about all this stuff, is that those of you who have been trudging along with me through the trenches of public presentations and all the rest of it, I never know what to call what I do, but anyway, are aware how important it has been to me to get validated, to get recognized, to have some sort of success, and how I've made no secret about that, and about my own ambivalence about it. Do I want it? What would it mean? What does it mean to not get it? And so on. And that's certainly one of, if not the main context for me sharing what's going on with me today, because a lot has happened just in this past week to indicate that I'm reaching a new level of recognition in the world, and it's happening in some very strange ways that also make me excited, of course, but also make me suspicious and concerned. And so I think it's worth sharing with you all, so that we can look at what might be going on here and the pros and cons of it. Okay, so the next thing was the Thelema thread at Reddit. This is a small thing, but still not that small. Again, linked in the show notes below the video. Somebody started a Reddit thread called Jasun Horsley in the Thelema group at Reddit, and I've heard about it through Google, because she has a name search for me, so she gets alerts whenever my name shows up on Google, which isn't very often. And so she sent me the link, and I didn't go there because I just figured, well, that would be trouble. That's not going to be an enjoyable experience. Hearing what people are saying about me at a Thelema group on Reddit. But what I did see was that the opening, the person who created the thread was saying, have you heard of this guy? He seems to have some clout in the occult community, even though he's against occultism. So that much I did pick up. Anyway, for some reason, I was on Reddit this week, and I was, oh, that's right, it was a weird thing again. Wait, no, I'm getting confused with the order of things. That doesn't make sense. Well, anyway, for whatever reason, I ended up back at the Thelema thread, or rather, I went there for the first time, and I saw that somebody there had posted a denial about, because the main post was asking, this person, that's me, seems to be saying that Aleister Crowley was involved in ritualized child abuse. This is a bit worrying. I'm a newbie to Thelema. What do you think? And there hadn't been very many comments, just a couple of people, and the main voice was saying this is all nonsense. The book is shite. It's ridiculous. There's absolutely no evidence whatsoever that Crowley was involved. And so, of course, that was a red flag for me. I couldn't resist chipping in or chiming in, and I made a couple of comments about, well, have you read the book? And anyway, and this person pressed on, saying, well, I've skimmed it, and even the author admits it's just speculative, and there's no need to look at this book. It's just nonsense. And so then I posted a comment, not to this person, but to the one who'd started the thread, with some links, some reviews of the book, and some links to the interviews I've done recently, so that they would have more to go on than just the automated debunker that was there trying to control the thread at Reddit. Next thing I know, I get a message in my email that I've been banned from Thelema the Salima group at Reddit, and with no explanation given. And I even messaged, well, I had a suspicion, and I looked into it, and sure enough, the person that had been commenting at the thread was one of the moderators of the Salima group. So that was easy to join those dots. So I messaged that person to say, hey, what's up? Why did you ban me? But I never got a response. And then I also messaged Reddit with a complaint. And I did get a response to that, saying they would look into it. So this seemed significant to me because last week I talked about how I didn't want to be seen as a threat in what I was doing, and because I didn't feel like I needed to be a threat, like I don't feel that what I'm doing is attempting to change the world or bring down the systems of control and so on and so forth. And it's easy to have that attitude. We're talking in a very large scale general way, because I recognize how futile and vain and hubristic that would be to believe that I could really make a difference in that way, or that I could ever understand the nature of what I'm attempting to understand and explore with people enough to condemn it or to take it down or whatever, counteract it. That's all true. But when it comes to a much smaller specific case such as this, well, I've written a book, Vice of Kings, which is, the second part of it is about Aleister Crowley's complicity with organized ritual abuse of children. And there's 100 pages of evidence there, which I think is very compelling. I would challenge anyone to come away from that book honestly not doubting. Well, this is assuming that they were already supporters of Crowley, and this is kind of, this is a central question for me. Like, can I reach people, Whitley Strieber fans, Crowleyites, who are really going to have their world rocked by what I've discovered, as opposed to people who are already well on the way of extricating themselves from the second matrix, or at least taking steps. Because it would seem that would be an optimal outcome, would really to help people who really are ensconced to see their way out of it, or at least begin to question. So yes, I do want this book to reach people who it will be a threat to, and therefore I do want to be a threat in that regard, in order to be effective. So the Reddit thread was bringing that home to me, because here was an environment in which what I was doing clearly was perceived as a threat, and there was a reaction against it, not a very strong one. Well, I suppose it's as strong as it could get within that particular context, but basically just somebody saying it's a shite book, it's lies, it's crap, and then me getting banned. I don't know why. My guess is because they figured out by looking at my other post that I was the author of the book, and that they thought, well, he should at least say that, or I don't know. There was why they would do it, and then why they would justify doing it. So I'm talking about the latter now. I imagine that they would justify it by saying that I should have identified myself or something like that, because I certainly didn't post anything contentious, provocative, argumentative, or anything like that. So essentially I was simply silenced, because what I was saying was not welcome in those parts. And it was a slightly difficult experience. Like, there was a degree of dread around checking to see if there'd been any more comments or any responses in that space. Like, for me to enter into a space created by Thelemites to defend or advocate my own work that is exposing Aleister Crowley, that feels like a dangerous place to be in. And of course it is, insofar as it's the tip of a very large iceberg. And that iceberg is my life. Well, it's the world and my life. I am embedded in the world. So yes, nothing that happens at Reddit can really harm me. Any amount of anxiety I might feel around that is, well, just stuff for me to deal with. It's just a character building experience. But it's an indication of where things could go if they just continue to grow in that way. Like the more recognition, the more clout I'm perceived as having, the more of a threat I can be perceived of to those factions that I am intent upon examining, putting under the microscope. Right, so that was the second thing. And the third thing was just a couple of days ago. Was it? No, it was just yesterday. It's really as fresh off the presses, fresh out of the oven. With Catherine Austin Fitts, who I didn't really know who she was. My wife knew about it. She knew about it. She'd been on Dreamland, so she didn't like her and didn't trust her. And I didn't, because of that mostly. And turns out I had heard of her because a reader or a listener had emailed me. And if you're listening at some point, send me a message, because I don't have a good search engine in Proton Mail. They don't, unfortunately. So I can't necessarily find the email, but I'd like to thank this person, because I'm pretty sure this was a result of their saying, oh, you should get Catherine Austin Fitts to review Vice of Kings. And I said, well, by all means, see what you can do. And it seems as though they were effective, because anyway, she did review it briefly at her website Solaris Report, which I imagine some of you know about, because it's quite a popular site. And so that was yesterday, and she tweeted about it. That's how I found out. That tweet now has 104 likes and 61 retweets. And as a direct result of it, Vice of Kings is now number one new release occult book. I feel like I should do a yay, but I'm divided in this regard, and I'm certainly not talking about it just so we can all celebrate and feel happy and you can pat me on the back. But it is exciting, of course, and it's very surprising. And I think I mean, it obviously goes up and down every hour, but it's been consistently somewhere around the 50,000 overall ranking. Amazon, which is the highest anything I've ever written has been, and somewhere around 60 or 80 in occultism books in general. So I suppose I'll come back to that, because it's interesting to see the context I'm in there, as far as, what are occult bestsellers. But before I get to that, I want to say a bit more about Catherine Austin Fitts. I listened to a podcast with her on Dreamland, a recent one, this morning, and I was pleasantly impressed by her. She seems reasonable. She seems credible. Whitley is still Whitley. And I messaged her today on Twitter to ask if she would like a PDF of Prisoner Infinity, since she was a regular on Dreamland. And she said that she had ordered it already, the paperback, but that to send the PDF anyway, because it would be useful. So so there's that. I mean, what to make of this? Like, what a strange position to be in. Talk about liminal. which side of the threshold am I on? I feel like I've got one foot on each side, and it's a fault line, and the tectonic plates may start moving apart at any point. So then I'd have to decide, which continent do I want to end up on? And I'm really not sure. Although currently I would definitely jump right back into the margin if I was faced with that choice. I definitely do not feel ready to be embraced by the mainstream, but nor am I averse to it, because even though I feel it would indicate something was really wrong, I would see it as an opportunity to find out more about myself and the audience cult or cults that I'm of interest to. I mean, this is obviously the first question place my mind would go, well, if somebody with as much influence and reach as Catherine Austin Fitts is now promoting Vice of Kings, what does that mean? And I don't know enough to have an opinion. I don't want to burn any bridges prematurely. It's clearly a very tangled web that the intelligence services have woven, that I call the second matrix, in which many good, sincere researchers are rubbing shoulders with intel agents without ever suspecting that they're doing so, and promoting each other's work. And I, well, at what point am I? Maybe I've already crossed that line. I mean, I've probably already done. I know I have done podcasts with intelligence agents and thereby promoted their work, mentioning no names, Peter Lamenda. But has it been done for me? Have I been promoted by intelligence agents without knowing it? And if so, why? Heather says, personally, I would see your connection to CAF to be a positive force for her learning and for your reach to increase. Thank you. Well, of course, I'm leaning there because I'm an optimist, I think, and I do believe in there are higher powers, there are deeper forces at work here than Lovecraftian ones. Never mind intelligence agencies and whatnot. And I do believe that. Well, I don't know how to put it in words, actually, but that there's a way to be in the world that facilitates success or allows for success that doesn't require compromise. At least I believe that in theory. I don't know if it's ever happened, though. And if it's never happened, it would be absurd to think it was going to happen for me. It didn't happen for Jesus, did it? Perhaps, dare I say, people might be changing, says Mari Hardy. Well, yeah, of course they are changing, but the question is how much is that change being co-opted and directed and subverted by the powers that be, because that's what they do. So, and to bring it back to specifics in that fault line I feel I'm standing on, one of the results of being promoted, reviewed by Catherine Austin Fitts, was that another person on Twitter called Echo, who has quite a few followers and describes himself as a QAnon writer, I believe, which doesn't mean that they are affiliated with QAnon. They may just be advocates of it. But anyway, they picked up my stuff and promoted both Vice of Kings and Prisoner of Infinity. I think they've removed the tweet now, though, because I couldn't find it today. I was going to link to it. But anyway, and they were clearly pro-Trump people. And I noticed that and I got like 20 or more new followers yesterday on Twitter just as a result of Catherine Austin Fitts and this other person. And I noticed that a few of them were clearly aligned with Trump and the the alt-right, I suppose. I mean, I was going to say whatever we'd call this thing, but it's been named the alt-right, perhaps misnamed. I'm sure there are plenty of people who don't affiliate consciously with that, but anyway, who support Trump or whatever it is. I mean, I don't know, but I know there's a lot of people that actually believe that Donald Trump somehow is is a fly in the ointment of the elite. I'm not one of them. To me, that's just a high level of sophisticated brainwashing to the one we saw with Obama, which was mind-boggling, that people could actually believe Obama was going to change something. Well, of course, he didn't. And that was really just killing off a very wounded animal, as in the faith in democracy of US citizens. Now US citizens don't really have faith in democracy anymore. They'll either just take the lesser of two evils, which would be the Hillary option, knowing that it's not democratic, but it's better than the alternative, or they'll take Trump because they believe that there's a coup is underway, or that there's well, I don't know exactly. I mean, I suppose they must still believe in democracy if they think they can vote Trump in. But I think most people here probably know the general narrative around Trump that has allowed even people within the circles of paranoid awareness, who should know better, in my opinion, to believe that Trump somehow is different. Well, he is different, of course. His personality is different, and probably even some of the groups backing him are different. I do think he is a fly in the ointment to some degree, and I talked about this on a recent podcast with Bill Ramsey. I think he's overtly displaying the barbaric nature of the elite rather than attempting to conceal it, and that they don't like him for that, certain factions who are perhaps a little behind the curve or not being included in the latest ramifications of the long-term social engineering game. But the idea that he's actually playing a wholly different game is just silly, I think. Again, though, Quanon and Trumpites could be folks just looking for alternatives to the status quo who have not yet realized that politics is psychological warfare. Yeah, I'm certainly not saying that, I don't want these people following me or anything like that. Just that it's a slippery slope to be on. In terms of having any kind of recognition or success, in this case, whoever it was, could end up with a fan base that was, like Jordan Peterson with his army of trolls, that was, well, I don't know, loose cannon or very hard to control. I don't want a fan base, I mean, at all, much less one I felt I had to control. But I don't know. Anyway, I just put that one, and it's kind of as a unfinished question, or an not yet fully articulated question, like what's going on here in terms of having increased recognition and thereby reach and thereby influence. At what price does it come? And what kind of changes will it bring about? Or has it already brought about? Because I don't want to make this about predicting the future necessarily. So, but I feel I was halfway to something there, just in terms of catching up on all the developments. There's definitely something more about Trump and all that. I can't remember what it was. It'll probably come back to me later. So well, let me just look at the links I put in the notes. Okay, Dreamland. I suppose I'll go back to the Amazon thing then, just quickly, because what I saw on Amazon, because I started looking at these bestseller lists, that I am now on, which, again, I don't know the numbers, but I'm guessing now that we're talking probably about maybe selling 5 or 10 copies of Vice of Kings today and yesterday. We're definitely not talking big figures, but enough to bump it up the ranks briefly. A spike, which could develop momentum. Word of mouth could mean it would just keep on keeping on. It wouldn't necessarily keep on growing, but it could just stay at a steady level. That's possible, and I think desirable. But one of the things that was very obvious right away and very predictable is I'm in very odd company. So I've got 2 lists. I think they're both linked down below. One is the new releases bestseller, where I'm one is the I can't even remember now. One is the bestsellers where I'm number 36, and all the other books practically are witchcraft manuals. Maybe not all of them, but about half of them. So this is just bestsellers, period. I'm confused because there's 2 different bestseller lists, and I want to refer to both of them. This one I'm number 36, and we got Wicca, Monstronomicon, Tarot for Beginners, Wicca for Beginners, The Coolim Case, Alphabet Soup, Strange Angel from Jack Parsons. That's the only vaguely similar book on the whole list, I think. Wicca Heart Soul, Wicca Magical Deities, Wicca Magic Starter Kit, Wicca Starter Kit, Wicca Moon Magic, Magical Cash Book, The Trees Have Eyes, Horror Stories. There's a paranormal one. Words of Power, the Kybalion, Archangels of Magic, Be As You Are, Wicca Candle Magic, The Art of Mysticism Practical Guide, Cruel Works of Nature, Angel Protection Magic, the 3 Magical Books of Solomon. That's the first Aleister Crowley one, surprisingly, to be on the list. Books of Solomon. I think that's particularly Enochian / satanic stuff, but it could be wrong. I think it's some of the deeper stuff. Anyway, Lucifer and the Hidden Demons. Don't know what that one is. Don't know what any of these are, but most of them speak for themselves. H.P. Blavatsky. Anyway, if you click on the image link, you'll see that they're very tacky looking books, almost all of them. Things that they look like they've been knocked off by either small publishers or mainstream publishers with their little, fringe arm to sell to obviously a particular demographic, teenagers, but also probably middle-aged women, witches. I don't know. I'm trying to think of customers in our store. I know that we have quite a few Wiccans and whatnot. And an interesting demographic, is it not? Not really my audience, although again, ideally these would be the people that might benefit it, albeit by reading Vice of Kings, albeit in such a way that they would be developing a whole new perspective on their chosen hobby, which is witchcraft. So Board 64 says, continue to focus on healing trauma and you'll likely negate the following you would have to worry about. I think that's very, very astutely put. I mean, I realized that I was talking with Gib about why these paranormal podcasts, for example, wouldn't have me on, even though they have people like Mike Cleland on, and even though they obviously know who I am. And so they were so excited that I was part of this story, you would think they would be interested in talking to me for the podcast. Why don't they? Well, there's 2 obvious reasons. One is as I'm going after some of the big guns that they like to fire, so to speak, or like to watch shooting. And the other is that what Board 64 says, that I always go into very deep, disturbing personal areas that negate the entertainment value of what I'm doing or of the subject matter. It's no longer entertainment. So I think that's really good, and that encapsulates actually, I think, partly maybe what I was trying to say about how it's possible to be effective in the world without compromising, in that I don't want a fan base. I don't want to reach loads and loads of people. I want to reach the right people. But in order to reach the right people, I have to reach loads of people, because there are lots of people to reach, not loads in a fame sense, and maybe a few thousand or whatever it would be. But they're distributed throughout the world, and a lot of them are simply not aware of, obviously not aware of me, but they're not aware of the possibility of healing. And in this way, they're not aware of the possibility of being embedded in a second matrix, and that there is a way out. So, because they're just being weaned on second matrix stuff, they don't even recognize they're in it. And so yes, it's as though the more people I can reach, the more I can find the people I'm trying to reach, and the others will fall away like steadily on a regular basis. And this has happened in the past. I mean, I've seen this happen. Like, I've been on Skeptico, and boom, there's presumably a spike in my hits, although I don't check my stats at the website much. But and then I get a few emails, but there's particular, specific 1 or 2 or 3 people that come to me, and they're very serious, and they found me via Skeptico, which I'm skeptical about initially, because I'm like, wow, if you listen to Skeptico, I wonder why you would be into what I do, because I'm risking burning bridges here, but I personally couldn't listen to Skeptico. It just wouldn't do it for me. And but that's neither here nor there, really, is it? Good morning, Janai. That's Janai, I did the latest podcast with. I recommend to all of you. I think it's a very unusual podcast, even for me. It's a kind of breakthrough, another crossing of the threshold for me to be able to talk to a survivor of ritual abuse in the room and share that. So anyway, I was halfway to something. So these occult lists. So the other bestsellers in occultism, I'm not sure why there are 2, but anyway, this one has, guess what is number 1? I'll give you a couple of seconds if anyone wants to type in their guess, obviously, if you've read it. Somebody's just asked Catherine if she's going to interview me on the Solari report. So there we go. There's stuff happening even as we sit here. Okay, no guesses? You'll kick yourself, because you could so easily have guessed this. I don't know if I would have done, but I certainly could have done. Number 1 on the occult bestseller list is The Satanic Bible by Anton Sandor LaVey. It has 1,020 reviews. My guess is it's probably always around number 1. Well, always is a long time, but like, it's a long-standing holder of the position of number 1, because if we go to number 2, we've got another of these cheesy Wicca books, a bit less cheesy, Wicca Book of Spells. I mean, at least the cover's nice. It's got 176 reviews. So okay, so it's been doing the rounds, but still you can see how that got nudged out in a while by its latest rival. The next one that seems like it's a long timer is The Pineal Gland, The Eye of God by Manly P. Hall. So you could see that one, being a big seller over a long period of time. Then there's this Kybalion again, Hermetic Philosophy. So that's 31 reviews. There's an Eric von Daniken, History is Wrong. Carlos Castaneda is at number 12, A Yaqui Way of Knowledge, Teachings of Don Juan. Strange Angel, again, at number 11. That's because of the TV show. The Satanic Rituals by LaVey at number 15. The Black Arts at number 17. Dictionary of Demons at number 22. It's another Manly P. Hall. There's the Necronomicon. That's what I was getting to. 29. 331 reviews. So there's another Castaneda. So what this confirms is that Satanism is big. It is a big seller. And what that confirms is that Vice of Kings is the fly in the ointment, is the jester in the pack, is the squeaky wheel. Well, you know, the unwelcome guest, the sheep among wolves. Actually, the sheep among wolves is a very welcome guest, isn't it? So, do I want to be a sheep among wolves, or do I want to be a wolf among sheep? Or do I just not want to be there? I don't know. I can't decide. And I can't decide, as in it's not up to me to decide that, because, well, I've set these forces in motion now. So if things do start getting weird, a la JBP, then there's not much I can do about it. Satan is the god of this world, says Janai. Yes, and that seems to be becoming overt. An open rule as opposed to a covert rule. Which would put me, yes, in a bit of a hairy position, really. As the one questioning the Emperor's clothes. For an awful lot of people. Yeah, forces in motion. So, dead air. Well, there's two ways I can go, and the one way is into the deep, and I do plan to get to the deep. But once I start going into the deep, I won't be able to go back to the shallow. And felt like there was a bit more shallow to get into in terms of this trajectory of being the wolf in sheep's clothing. There was an unfinished point there, but I can't remember what it was. That's 2 now. Dangling there in the ether. All right, well, so I'll just go to the deep then. And that is this question of setting forces in motion. Corresponds with the belief in occultism that once we've made a pact with entities, forces, we can't cancel it. You can't renege on it. That's a very prevalent belief within occultism. And I think there's definitely some truth about it. As once you've invoked the forces of your unconscious, they will emerge. However, as they do emerge, there is the option of recognizing that they're not what they seem, or what we thought we were invoking is not necessarily what's emerging. That's also part of the folklore of occultism, of course. You know, devils in disguise as angels and all of that trick us into making bargains that we later want to get out of but can't. Because of the first development that I described today around these people who came not seeking the paranormal exactly, but they were partly doing that. I mean, one of the things they said, they went into the bush and they made it clear that their intent wasn't to have an experience of the paranormal, but just to be there and just see what happened. They made it clear in the podcast that was important. And so there was a certain amount of wisdom there. They weren't actually out there seeking to provoke these forces, but they were curious to make themselves available, which is perhaps a subtle difference, but still a difference. Or maybe they just wanted to go camping, but they were aware that something might happen, but they were careful not to set their intent for that. But anyway, hearing about this experience and it bringing home, gosh, 55 minutes already, that that I am embedded in this invisible world in which things are alive around me. Hidden forces are at work and at play always around me. The whole thing about the paranormal is something that I've put a lot of time and energy into deconstructing and showing the pitfalls of it and how it can be manufactured and simulated. And here I am now, right after Vice of Kings come out, which is the third in this trilogy, which is essentially showing the pernicious nature of human psychosocial, cultural engineering that informs so much of our beliefs about the paranormal and even our experiences of it, that it's almost enough for me to dismiss the whole reality of the paranormal altogether, even though I never have. I've never taken that position, but it's enough that people might think that I had. And certainly in terms of, well, just stay away from that stuff, I more or less have taken that position. But what I'm remembering through these recent kind of encroachments on my own life from the world itself is that we can't stay away from it. I can't stay away from it because we're embedded in that world. It is a hidden world that this world is embedded in, not just the superstructure, the superculture of organized ritual abuse, crime, and all that, but the hidden world of the jinn, or entities, or ancestral presences, whatever else may be there. Very much alive, very much aware of us. Very interesting comment that somebody put at my blog that from a book that I read in my 20s. I've gone and forgotten what it is now, but anyway, you can find the comment at my blog about how if we could see demons, we would exploit them, because that's what we do as human beings. And that, I mean, I hadn't really thought about that in such stark terms. I always often said about how if we could see the demons, life would be unlivable, because it would be so terrifying if we could see these presences around us, which I don't think are exclusively demonic. Let's say the jinn and ancestors. Let's say those two kind of facets of disincarnate, invisible consciousness that we're embedded in. But I hadn't thought about so starkly, that, well, actually it's in the demon's own interest, not just so they can control us, but so that we can't control them. But then, of course, this is what magic is. This is what occultism is. It's the exploitation of demons. Albeit, as with all exploitation, with a rationale usually that this is somehow benign, and possibly it could be. I mean, one can use supposedly allies. I mean, one can connect to these forces to heal others. That doesn't mean there isn't a cost. It doesn't mean that that's not exploitation of these forces. Say the same about psychedelic drugs and whatnot. Yes, they may be powerful and they may be benign in and of themselves, but if we actually try and use them to expand our own consciousness, whatever it is we think we're getting from them, are we not exploiting those forces, and are we not thereby opening up ourselves to exploitation by them, since it's usually a symbiotic relationship? anyway, this wasn't where I was going with this. Where I was going with this is my realization, my insight that having now mapped very thoroughly the human manipulations that the whole paranormal and psychic world has been compromised by or being filtered through, is it now time for me to begin to address the reality of that world, having created this foundation of look more closely at how human beings and groups have been able to manipulate this phenomena, thereby even counterfeit it, simulate it. So if you are a receiver or an experiencer of psychic and paranormal phenomena, do you know for sure that that isn't being manufactured by human agencies with technology and other means, drugs and so on and so forth? Many times you won't know that. These technology that is sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable to us from magic. Well, what about technology that's actually designed to simulate magic? They do have these technologies. This is a point I didn't get to with Catherine Austin Fitts in her interview with Whitley, that she talks about brain entrainment technology, which is used to get you into a different brain state in a supposedly benign way, such as the transmission that David Shan talks about, gets us into. It's no mind state. We're open to the energies of the body and the soul, and can have a deeper experience of our being. Well, this technology, according to Catherine Austin Fitts, and it's very easy to believe, is being used covertly to prime us for subliminal programming. So she described going to a meeting where she felt euphoric as soon as she went in the room, and she found herself applauding and praising the speaker even though she didn't like him, and realizing that she had been manipulated like this. Well, that's just one example. This could be going on in your local supermarket, for all you know. Could be on the whole planet now via the satellite link-up, although of course we're not feeling euphoric all the time, so there would be other forms of entrainment that Catherine Austin Fitts. There's a link in the show notes below the video. But anyway, that was just an example what I'm talking about. So yeah, number one, we don't necessarily know if our psychic / paranormal experiences are real, in the sense that there could be human technological simulations of that to manipulate us. Number two, well, this indicates two things. Well, yeah, there is a reality that's being simulated or counterfeited, but it also indicates or clues us to the fact that even the real psychic and the real paranormal phenomena is itself a kind of counterfeit. It's real, but it's not as real as our cultural programming and our beliefs have led us to believe. It's not a spiritual experience. Psychic paranormal experiences are not necessarily equivalent to spiritual. They could be. So here we've got overlapping layers. You could have a human / technology manipulated experience of the paranormal that isn't really paranormal, but opens you up to the paranormal world that's already there, so it becomes paranormal. Same as if you take psychedelics. Well, they're not paranormal. You might have an experience of the paranormal via psychedelics, but is it really the paranormal, or is it a psychedelically induced delusion? Well, there's a blurry line, there's a spectrum where a delusion becomes real. So there's the same spectrum, I believe, on the next level up between truly paranormal, non-induced experiences that are spontaneous encounters with the paranormal, such as these two guys had in the bush, apparently, as they describe on the podcast. Though they might have been smoking marijuana. I need to ask them about that. But anyway, between these kinds of experiences, like described by Carlos Castaneda, say, the ones that didn't require drugs, and a genuine encounter with the divine, or with spiritual reality. And that in-between realm, the paranormal, the true paranormal, is not the true spiritual. That's the realm of the jinn. So, well, I don't know enough about it to say. It's not a science. But there's a whole spectrum there in terms of benign and malign and neutral jinn. Anyway, what occurred to me was that this is an area that I've mapped quite thoroughly for myself, and this is an area that could be useful to others in terms of if you feel that you are embedded in, if you're aware of being embedded in the world of the paranormal and you want to be stabilized within that, or you need to be stabilized within that, and you need to orientate ourselves by steady degrees away from the material, temporal realm, the worldly realm, which some say is the satanic realm, to orientation towards the divine, the spiritual realm, the eternal. We have to go through the realm of the paranormal. We can't go around it because the whole of this physical reality is nested or embedded within the paranormal realm, which is where the jinn and all these guys and the ancestors, I suppose, are operational. And so that's first matrix, second matrix, reality. How do we get back to reality? Well, there's two ways. We need to become fully grounded in the physical and in our bodies and fully functional within the physical world and render unto Caesar or Satan what is Caesar's. But we also need to use that, or to not use that, but we need to allow for that to be a way to discover what is don't know how to word that, but the source of this world, the true source, what it emerges from, which is the eternal, emerges from the eternal. And so that, no, and just that's just a thought I had, a realization I had, that there's a useful application for the experiences that I've had, and I want to be applying them more. And one of the clues to that is that I'm being invited to acknowledge the world of the paranormal and the psychic in a new way, not as a debunker, as an explorer, but with the recognition that this is not a world to explore per se, but a world that has to be explored in order to be navigated, in order to pass through it to the other side, to go beyond the paranormal. And just catch up real quick. Persinger, Delgato et al., The Wet Dream of Intelligence Cults Everywhere. And yeah, it's talking about the brain entrainment stuff there. The mass initiation of the 60s as part of the LAM project. Heather's put LAM, L-A-M, in capitals, so I'm guessing that's an acronym and not a reference to Crowley's LAM, although I'm sure it's not coincidental, because Crowley's LAM supposedly is the vehicle for traveling the astral realms, so a kind of gatekeeper of the paranormal realms, and of course the grey alien figure. Ross Dixon, I liked that word manipulate, particularly the double-edged definition. The action of manipulating something in a skillful manner. The format allows fast picture manipulation. The action of manipulating someone in a clever or unscrupulous way was no deliberate manipulation of visitors' emotions. Heather Tracy, Whitley, ungrounded but embedded in the paranormal. He believes what is presented to him there, not willing to see beyond. Yes, we need to know how to navigate through that world in a healthy way. Oh, okay, so Heather's saying it was, Lamb is a reference to Crowley. Okay. There probably is a LAM project somewhere out there. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to open the Zoom room, like I said I would earlier. This is a kind of experiment. And blah, that's not it. Let's do that one. And then I'll post the link. And if anyone would like to ask a question on the live YouTube, mute myself, then you can do so. All you have to do is click on the link and find yourself in Zoom and start speaking, and you should come through the speaker. And if you have any problem, just type in the chat bar. This is in the last 10 minutes or so. I try to keep these to an hour and 20. I'm quite anal when it comes to structure, as people have probably noticed with my timing of podcasts and stuff. And I think it's probably healthy for me. It probably isn't anal, really, because, well, I just think it is. I'm so unstructured in other ways that I think this is one of the ways that I can intensify the message. So I heard somebody on Zoom. So if you're on Zoom, you can still hear me and you want to speak, then just go for it. Who is it though? I'm moving a lot of different technology there. Okay, so nobody's muted. So anyone wants to speak, you might just be going over there because you think this is where the party is. But
Hello.
Hello, Rob.
Hello.
Yes, can you hear me?
Oh,
There's probably a delay.
yes, there's a delay.
Okay, let me unmute. I'm unmuting now. We'll see if we get some horrendous feedback effect. Now you can hear me in real time, right?
I'm unmuting now. Let's see if we get some horrendous feedback effect.
But you have to turn me down on YouTube, otherwise we'll have that echo. Anyway, go ahead. What's your question? Hello?
Hello.
Many echoes. I think this is going to be disturbing to listeners.
Many echoes. I think this is going to be disturbing to listeners.
All right, abandon that project then. Yeah, the only way is you just have to. You can't speak to me on Zoom. You can ask a question, but that's it. You can just do that, and you can ask a question at any time because you've got the power to mute and unmute. So in the meantime, I'll just be winding up on YouTube unless I get a question to keep me going. So yeah, technically this is clearly not optimal. If anyone wants to assist with this in terms of actually making the YouTube event, making it work with people coming onto it, because I don't know how to do it. I tried Google Hangouts, but that didn't work, and I don't really want to use Google Hangouts anyway. There are ways to do it, but it's complex. But if anyone wants to volunteer. So I guess I'll just do my winding up. Heather just asked a deep question, but I think because Heather's on Zoom, so hopefully you'll still be on Zoom and I can answer that over on Zoom. I'll just wind up here with the usual plugs and whatnot, which is buy Vice of Kings. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Like it. Share it. And all the other stuff. Yeah. Weekly Liminalist podcast. Keeping up blog posts, usually weekly. And you can also follow me on Twitter if you want to. It's all at my website, horticulture.com. And if you'd like to support this event I'm doing now, or anything else I'm doing, if you want to see more, and if you want to keep this from ever being monetized, then give me some money. It's very simple, because as long as people just donate out of the kindness of their heart because they want to support, I won't ever have to put a monetary basis on it. I'll be able to continue doing it that way, and that way it's equalized. Like the people who can't afford it can get exactly what the people who can afford to donate. And well, I don't know, is that communism? I just am very averse to paywalls or anything like that, and I probably won't ever do them. We'll see. I'd much rather make this a communal thing. Okay, so lastly, and if you do want to donate, it's Jason with a U at protonmail.com via PayPal. And the last thing is that I have a policy for the meetings. This doesn't include the YouTube meeting because you're just there and you're in space. But once we go over to the Zoom room, as people who've been there before know, I have a sobriety policy. So that means no drinking alcohol or smoking marijuana or any other drugs before or during the meet. I also have a no smoking policy. As far as prescription medications, that's of course I'm not going to interfere with that. But and coffee, yeah, I'm not a hardliner about that. But that's a requirement that I'm making more public now. I mean, it's been in the experimental phase, and now it's becoming more concretized, more formalized, and so I would like to make that clear to everyone. And I can give my reasons on another occasion, perhaps, if anyone wants them. All right. Well, as I said, there are links to most or all the stuff I've referred to today in the show notes at the bottom of the video if you want to find out more about that stuff. And if you want to continue this into a more conversational space, then the Zoom link is there in the chat space, and you can find me there in about 3 minutes or so, because I have to take a quick bathroom break. Okay, well, thanks everyone for showing up. It's been quite a free-rolling, fast-moving one this time. Also, let me know if you like this format. I presume we won't have lots of breaking news every week, but then who knows? Maybe it'll just keep on going like this. But I could always find, I can still keep with this general format, or if you prefer the previous format of a kind of lecture presentation, I can also do that. I could alternate, what have you. Just let me know what you think. Okay, I'll see those of you who wish to be seen over in Zoom in a couple of minutes. This is Jasun Horsley. One more time, news from the front line in the end times. No story.